So what's the real difference between a decent Android app and one that's, truly professional grade? It's not just about the slick UI or the cool features. It's what's under the hood, the foundation. Today, we're going to dig into the architectural blueprint that lets you build apps that are scalable, super easy to test, and honestly, just a pleasure to work on. We're talking about taking the MVVM pattern you already know and leveling it up with something called clean architecture. All right, let's call this first part the code base maze, because let's be honest, we've all been there. You start a new project, everything's fresh and organized, and then, well, things get complicated. Sound familiar? I mean, you know exactly what I'm talking about, right? Your boss asks for what seems like a simple, tiny new feature, but to implement it, you feel like you're untangling a giant knot of Christmas lights. You end up touching a dozen different files, and you're just holding your breath, praying you don't break something totally unrelated on the other side of the app. It's a nightmare, and it happens to the best of us. And a lot of the time, this is the culprit right here. We all start out with the best intentions, right? We use MVVM, but before you know it, your view models have turned into these enormous, bloated monsters, what some people call God classes. They're trying to do everything. They're making network calls, they're talking to the database, they're running all the business logic, and they're managing the UI state. It's just too much for one class to handle, and that's exactly where the clean code base begins to fall apart. Okay, so how do we get out of that maze? We need a better plan, a cleaner blueprint. And that's where clean architecture enters the picture. It's the structure we need to bring some sanity back to our app.
Really, clean architecture boils down to one super important idea: separating your concerns. The best way to think about it is like a house, right? You should be able to completely gut and renovate your kitchen without the slightest worry that the roof over the bedroom is going to collapse. It works the exact same way in your app. The very core of your app, all your important business logic, shouldn't know or care about the outside layers, like what the UI looks like or what database you're using.
So, how do we build that house? Well, we do it by splitting our app into 3 distinct layers. First, you've got the presentation layer. That's everything the user actually sees and touches. Then, deep in the middle, you have the domain layer. This is the brains of the whole operation. And finally, there's the data layer, which is in charge of, well, all the data. Let's break each one down. Okay, first up, the presentation layer. This is your UI, plain and simple. We're talking activities, fragments, composables, all that good stuff. Now, your view model still lives here, but its job gets a major downgrade, in a good way. Instead of being that God class we talked about, it becomes more like a simple traffic cop. Its only job is to direct things, manage the UI state, tell the layers below what the user just did, and then show the results. That's it. Almost zero business logic lives here anymore. Now for the really important part, the heart of your entire application, the domain layer. This is where your actual business logic lives. The rules that make your app unique, like how to calculate a discount or validate a username. And here's the magic trick. This entire layer is pure Kotlin. It has zero, and I mean zero, knowledge of the Android framework. Why is that so cool? Because it means you can test it lightning fast on your local machine, and you could, in theory, reuse that logic on another platform. This layer is made up of things called use cases, which are just simple classes that do one thing well, and it sets the rules or contracts for how the rest of the app gets its data. Last but not least, we've got the data layer. Its job is pretty straightforward. It handles all the data. It doesn't matter if that data is coming from a server halfway across the world or from a local database right on the device. Remember those contracts or rules from the domain layer? Well, this is the layer that actually implements them. It figures out the nitty-gritty details, like, hey, should I grab fresh data from the API, or is the stuff I have in the cache still good? This makes it the single source of truth for all the data in your app. Okay, so that's all the theory. But theory is one thing, and a real-world project with a deadline is another. So let's get practical. Let's talk about how to use these ideas without being a slave to them. And this quote right here, this is everything. You have to treat this architecture as a guide, not a religion. It's not a set of rules you have to follow to the letter, or else. If you're building a small, simple app, or you've got a crazy tight deadline, it is absolutely okay to bend the rules. The whole point is to ship a better product, not to win an award for the most perfect architecture. So this leads to a question that comes up all the time. If the domain layer is all about use cases, does that mean I really have to create an entire new class just for a super simple action, like fetching a list of items from the database? And the answer is definitely not. Look, creating a use case class that has only one line of code in it, which just calls the repository, that's what we call boilerplate. It's just adding complexity for no reason. Use cases really shine when you have actual, complex business logic. Think about combining data from two different places or running some tricky calculations. For simple stuff, your basic create, read, update, delete operations, it's often way more practical to just let the view model talk directly to the repository. Be pragmatic. All right, so we've got the theory and we know we need to be practical. Now let's talk about the traps. Here are the 3 most common pitfalls that developers fall into when they try to implement this, so you can steer clear of them. Okay, pitfall number 1. This is probably the biggest one, letting any Android-specific code leak into your domain layer. So you see that import android.util.patterns line in a use case? That's a huge red flag. The second you do that, you've broken the most important rule. And more practically, you've just made it impossible to run fast, simple unit tests on your business logic. The right way to do it is to define a contract, like a simple validator interface, in your domain. Then you put the actual Android-specific implementation somewhere else, like the data layer. That way, your domain stays pure and your tests stay fast. Next up, pitfall number 2, abstracting literally everything. It's so easy to get carried away and think, I'll make an interface for this, and an interface for that. But listen, an abstraction only really makes sense if you actually have or plan to have more than one implementation. Don't create an interface for a simple mapper class. A simple Kotlin extension function is cleaner and less code. And please, don't create interfaces for your use cases. You want to test the real logic, not a fake version of it. Don't add complexity for no reason. And our third and final pitfall, the package structure. This one might seem small, but it has huge consequences as your app grows. The wrong way, which you see on the left, is to package by layer. So you have one giant data folder, one giant domain folder. Trust me, this becomes an unmanageable mess very quickly. The right way is to package by feature. You have a folder for profile, one for the feed, one for auth, and so on. Then, inside each of those feature folders, you have your layers. This keeps everything organized and scales so much better. So, after all of that, the layers, the rules, avoiding the pitfalls, you might be asking, what's the big payoff? Why do we go through all this trouble? Let's look at why this stuff actually matters. Well, a study actually went out and asked a bunch of Android developers, what are your biggest concerns when it comes to the quality of your code? And look at this, the results are crystal clear. It's not even close. Maintainability and testability are the top 2 by a long shot. These are the things that keep us up at night and make our jobs harder on big, long-running projects. And that same study also asked, okay, so what patterns are you actually using to solve these problems? And no surprise here, MVVM is right up there. But you also see clean architecture principles being a huge part of the discussion. So the point is, this isn't just some theory from a blog post. These are real battle-tested patterns that developers are using in the wild to fix their biggest headaches. And that's the whole point, right there. This is the big aha moment. A clean architecture isn't just about making things look neat and tidy. It is specifically designed to attack the 2 biggest problems we developers face, making our code easier to maintain and easier to test. That's the payoff. That's why it's worth it. So let's end with this because it's the most important thing to remember. Being a great architect isn't about following some rulebook to the letter or perfectly copying a diagram you found online. It's about understanding the why, the principles of keeping things separate and managing dependencies. And then it's about using your judgment to make smart, pragmatic decisions that actually help you build a better, stronger app that can last for years to come.